Rahim, we have a really unique topic beyond benefits, beyond savings plans, beyond the financial aspect today. We have a very special guest, Tammy Vigue, coming in today, a retirement coach. What are we going to hear from her, Rahim? What are you excited about?
You know what? I think this is a eye opening conversation. I for one, even though I'm in the industry, I don't pay a lot of attention to the thought behind what really matters, which is someone's psychology and their identity and how that matches up in retirement. So I think our listeners are in for a treat. I'm just going to tease by saying there's a number that 8,000 is the number that you'll hear. It matches the hours you're going to be spending in retirement. So you want to make sure that you have a plan. So I'm looking forward to it, Caroline.
Yeah. I think I'm going to learn a lot myself too. All right, let's bring her in. Thank you for joining us today, Tammy, and wonderful to have you. We've got a very interesting topic, very unique topic today, I think. And I would like to start off by just hearing a little bit about your background and how you became a retirement coach.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I actually became a retirement coach in about 2008, actually. So I had started a coaching business that was primarily focused on stress management and wellness. I had a background in the financial industry previous to that. So I'd worked in the financial industry, started this coaching business. And a lot of the people that started showing up in my coaching programs were lawyers in their 60s. And what was interesting about this group was that many of them had mandatory retirement at age 65. And prior to that, I believed, having worked in the financial industry, that if you had a lot of money saved, you'd be looking forward to retirement. And these lawyers had a lot of money saved. They would never have to worry about running out of money in retirement, but they were dreading it. So they were talking about themselves as if they were going to become invisible, irrelevant, like they no longer mattered. And so for me, it was the first time that I realized that there was much more to the retirement decision than just having, a nest egg or having financial security. So that's when I started to dive deep into what is this about retirement? How do we help people prepare for those non-financial aspects that I would argue are probably more important than the financial. So maybe that might be something that we can talk about as to do we think that the finances are more important or the non-financial are more important?
So Tammy, I gotta ask, it's a pretty curious time to start a retirement business coming right out of the financial crisis. So how was that for you?
It was an interesting experience because I think people were so worn down by the financial crisis, and it wasn't really about money that I was talking about necessarily anyway. So it was quite an interesting new direction for me as well. So previously, I used to help people with that question of, do I have enough money to retire? And then I was shifting to really, what am I retiring to? So money wasn't necessarily coming all that much into that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we've just recently, Rahim and I have been speaking with a few different guests about, all about the savings and educating about savings and matching programs and maximizing that nest egg. And what, we've obviously been talking about in today's world versus 30 years ago, people are needing to save for, whether it's 20, 30, 40 years of retirement or partial retirement as compared to 30 years ago when you may have had 10 years of runway before, that was that. So, we're so focused on that nest egg. And now this is why today is going to be very, very interesting. So I think to start off, I'll just ask you, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about retirement that you've encountered in your coaching work?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one is that it is a financial decision. So that it is all about that nest egg. So that's, we've all worked in the financial industry. That was our job, or is our job. And the reality is, though, that for high achievers, the money isn't necessarily the most important piece. So what I'm seeing, or what I see in my coaching business, is that a lot of people come to coaching because they are struggling more with the identity loss. So, when we think about it, retirement, the way that we plan for retirement is all about income replacement, making sure that we have enough money to fund that period of life. But our work gives us way more than just a paycheck. So identity, status, structure, intellectual stimulation, challenge, relationships. So all of those aspects of work, those non-financial aspects of work, are equally important to replace when we get to that next phase of our lives. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception that I have, or that people have, is that it's just a financial decision. I have that, that bucket of money, or that retirement savings that I know will fund that period of life, but we're not really necessarily thinking about what life will look like. What are we going to do? How are we going to spend our time? How are we going to replace those intangible aspects of work that are really important to us too?
So Tammy, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but in September of 2024, CAPSA guidelines came out with an update to their best practices, and one of the important components within CAPSA guidelines is more of a focus on retirement planning. And
Mm,
we are now told that a plan member not just needs to focus on how much money goes into their retirement savings account, but what does that mean for retirement? So I think employers are used to kind of knowing, yes, from a financial perspective and the dollars perspective, we need to help our plan members or our team members be mindful of that. So talk to us about how group benefits and retirement consultants can talk to their plan sponsors or their clients on thinking the way you're talking about, which is kind of the art of it all.
hmm Well, I'm encouraged to hear that the CAP guidelines have changed. I was around the first time around when they came out, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that's encouraging to hear that there is more of a focus on retirement planning. So one of the things that I would say for group benefits and GRS consultants would be to understand that the retirement transition is more than a financial decision. So that's the first piece. There was some research that came out of Stanford Center on Longevity a few years ago that was looking at how complex the decision to retire is. And they talked about there are really actually three domains that individuals, as they're approaching retirement, need to consider. One is financial, which is addressed by group retirement services. And the question that people will be asking themselves is, do I have enough money to retire? The second is health. And that question is, do I have to retire? Does my health or the health of a loved one require me to retire? That's addressed by group benefits. So those two aspects of retirement planning are covered in traditional benefits. The last piece, the last domain, is psychological. And the question is, do I want to retire? And that's where there's been a gap. There hasn't been very much offerings in terms of retirement lifestyle planning traditionally. So that's the piece where I say that there's a huge opportunity not only for advisors and consultants to really make an impact and also differentiate themselves in this space, because it's still a bit of a missing element in terms of retirement preparedness. And so, how do you address that psychological, that piece around retirement readiness? I think it's really about hosting, workshops with potentially retirement coaches, doing, lunch and learns around this piece, inviting previously retired employees to come back and have conversations with people that are still working. The interesting and easy way to integrate that into your wellness program. So I think it's really about opening up the conversation, because I've been doing this now for a very long time, and still, when I'm doing presentations, when I'm talking to employees about this aspect of retirement planning, it is often the first time they've ever heard that there's more to retirement planning than just savings. So I think that there's a real huge opportunity to expand this conversation.
I just wanted to follow up on that. So, Tammy, what would be your recommendations in terms of timing? Like, I know you probably are not the biggest fan of, retire at 65 notion that we've had, but
Mm-hmm.
assuming plan sponsors are open to this line of thinking, and I think most would be,
Mm-hmm.
what is the time frame in which people need to start thinking a certain way? So I know, from a dollar's perspective, we plan as, sooner the
Mm-hmm.
better to take
Yes.
advantage of compounding. Health
Yeah.
is what it is, right? But in terms of the timing, is it like start thinking about this 5 years before retirement? Are there any general concepts that you think are good to
My
bake in?
personal opinion is that this conversation should be, immediate. Like it should start as early as possible. It should start at the same time that we're talking to employees about saving for retirement, is helping them start to think about what will that phase of life look like for you? What do you want it to look like? So, as a consultant in the GRS, the number one question that I would get asked is, do I have enough money to retire? It's impossible to answer that question if you don't know what you're retiring to. So I would say the life plan should be the first piece, and then the financial plan is built to support the life plan. So my advice, I mean, the reality is most people come to retirement lifestyle planning sessions. It's, they self-select, do they want to attend this session? They're generally in their 50s, 50 and over. I've had people come to sessions who are much younger. They're more interested in life planning. So there's no hard and fast rule as to when should you be doing it. My personal advice would be do it as early as you can, because it just makes that planning so much more robust. And so yeah, do it as early as you can. And really
Okay.
it's about creating a vivid picture of who you are in that next phase of life. So there's a lot of research in psychology showing the impact of what's called future self continuity. And what that means is that the more vividly we can picture ourselves, our future retired selves, how is that person spending their time? What brings them meaning and purpose? If we can develop a relationship with the person we are becoming, it's been shown to positively impact our behavior in the current. So we save more money, we adopt healthy lifestyle habits, we're making sure that we're taking care of ourselves today so that the possibility of becoming that future version is much more likely. So I think that that's a really important piece, is helping people to start to think about, who am I? What do I want? Who do I want to become in the next phase of my life? So future self is a really important piece of that.
Great. Thank you.
Such a great point, because how do we model what we think our future looks like is going to be first. What did our grandparents do if we saw them retire? What did our
Yeah.
parents do if we saw them retire, or close friends of the family? And so oftentimes, even whether it's commercials on TV, it's always the cruise around the world and walks on the beach.
Totally.
And I mean, I think I could do that for quite a while. But maybe
Yeah.
after a year or two, I might want to do something else. But so it is.
Yeah.
It's helping people, like that vision board. Imagine your life and being
Mm-hmm.
specific. That's so key. So logical, but so
Yeah.
few would do that, and it's a bit scary, I think. Yeah.
Well, and I think, you alluded to this idea that we've kind of grown up in this society where we are told, really, it's sort of conditioned to believe that retirement is about rest and relaxation, the luxury cruises, the travel, spending time with our families, like that leisure retirement. And that retirement, that vision of retirement might not necessarily be complete for us today. So our parents and our grandparents' retirement might not be the model for us today. And so there was a really interesting study that came out of MIT's Age Lab, and they asked They asked participants to describe how they would imagine their lives after their careers. So choose 5 words on how you would imagine your life after career. And the words that came out were all centered around, that leisure retirement. So it was rest, relaxation, freedom, travel, family, fun, all of these things that we think that we want, in our retirement, or the commercials tell us we should want in our retirement. And it really highlighted that we've really grown up with this really one-dimensional view of what this period of life might look like. And it's really important for us to expand that definition beyond just those, that one-dimensional view of retirement, because retirement today could mean many different things. It likely isn't going to be, for many of us, that full stop of work. It might mean starting a business, philanthropy, volunteering, recareering, working part-time. Our new retirement is much different than it was for, our parents or grandparents or people in previous generations. And I think that that's good. It's like, what do we want it to be? As you said, Carolyn, like, what if retirement is 30 or more years? Like, what if your runway, what if that period of life is a new life stage? How are you going to fill that time in meaningful and purposeful ways? So I think it's really important for us to expand the way that we're thinking about and planning for retirement.
I've got a question for Rahim, actually.
Yeah.
For sure, an employer that has helped me save financially for retirement is amazing, right? That you feel supported, you feel like you're, getting more than a paycheck at that point, right? It's helping build your future. This is next level. So Rahim, like, as an advisor who's facilitating bringing in conversation, whether it is with someone like a Tammy, or, as Tammy said, inviting, even just having a lunch and learn, and inviting prior retirees back to the company to talk openly about their experience. Like, this has got to really be next level for the employer and the plan member, what they're feeling about that. Like, can you comment on that as someone that works day in and day out?
Yeah, and I'm conflicted on this idea, because on one end I think it's very important, and I think on the whole, plan sponsors do really care about their employees and they want to help them towards retirement, right? On the other hand, there is a true financial cost of having a plan that's very generous, that it allows someone to get there, right? So I think this type of thinking, incorporating kind of the art and the science together for companies that have very robust plans, I think it's easy, and I as a plan sponsor will want to do that because my employees will actually see the value in the plan, right? Because I was easily able to, through the ongoing contributions, get them to a retirement savings that lined up with how they wanted to spend time in retirement. Like, there's no shortfall, for example. But the reality is that we have a lot of plan sponsors that have plans that are, a 2% matching plan or a 3% matching plan. And that doesn't really get you to that replacement ratio. And I think for those people to bring back certain employees, it may not be that positive of an experience, because they're only making a dent in someone's retirement future. But I do like the idea. And Tammy, as you were speaking about the lifestyles, it took me back to some of the carrier tools, and I'm glad to say that a lot of the insurance carriers, who are the big record keepers on the retirement side, their retirement planning tools are situation based, right? So what type of retirement do I want to have? Do I want it to be kind of stay at home and hang out with my grandkids, or do I want it to be lavish and be a jet setter? And their goals align to that, and whether you have a shortfall or on track. So I think from an industry perspective, we are not that far off, but we could definitely do a lot more. And I think there are certain plan sponsors who have a really good story to tell, and certain plan sponsors where they don't. I'll give you a little anecdote. I was doing one-on-ones with a client of ours last week, and they have a really interesting pension plan where an employee is not required to make any contributions and they get a base contribution. But in Canada, we have such a big influx of new immigrants who have not been at a company their entire lives. You
Hmm.
have 55-year-olds, 60-year-olds that only have 15, $20,000 in their retirement savings plan. And
Right.
for those people, there is certain elements of reality that I think as a fiduciary is owed to them, right? And I think, Tammy, you alluded to this. If you have 20,000 and you think you're going to be a jet setter, well, psychologically you want to change your mindset because that's not reality, right? So
Yeah.
it's a good question, Caroline. I think it's going to be plan sponsor specific,
Mhm.
but on the whole, it's a topic that we should get on board with because the psychology of retirement is really powerful, and that's where people will, I think, feel it the most when they retire if they're
Yeah,
not ready.
Hmm.
They're
yeah.
expecting something that's not, aligning with that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, like, I know for sure, because I have family members and people that I know in this situation where even though you may have the money to retire, they're still hanging on. And I know
Yeah.
they're doing a great job, all of those things, but we touched on it a bit around, it's a stressful event. It is a life
Hmm.
event. And so
Hmm.
that fear of like ending that big chapter of feeling such a valuable contributor and taking that psychological step to the future, having an employer that might help facilitate and help you visualize that future, you're going to just feel very supported to take that brave next step. So maybe with
Hmm.
that said, Tammy, when we think about, we've talked a bit about what are some of the practical ways that people can help support that, but what advice would you give to someone who is approaching retirement but feels really unsure about what comes next?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say, well, first of all, you talked about the stress of retirement. The reality is that retirement is in the top 10 most stressful life events. So that is something that I think we should all be talking about too. So, we've grown up with that freedom 55 image of what retirement is. We should all be having a lot of fun and retiring as early as we can. But the reality is, certainly high achievers will be struggling with the idea of leaving their career. So leaving their identity, leaving the structure, status, all of the things that our careers give us. So I think, planning as early as we can as to what we want to bring forward in retirement is really important. So beyond the endless beach walks and the daily golf games, how will you spend your days? If we think about it, on average, you're going to need to fill about 8,000 days. So thinking about like, what is an ideal weekday for me? How do I want to spend my time? In my program, what I do is I get people to really go into what I call their authentic self. And authentic self I define as your values, your strengths, your passions, hobbies, and interests, and also what it is that you love about your work identity. And that's a really important piece. So defining all these aspects of yourself, like who am I now at this stage and phase of my life? What do I want more of? That's a really important piece to be exploring before retirement, so that once we get to that last day of work, we have a plan for what we're retiring to versus just retiring from something. And so the other part that I think is really important to consider is that retirement isn't just a change in the work situation. It's not just a change, it's a transition. And change and transition are two different things. Change is situational, transition is psychological, emotional. And so the decision to retire, to leave your career, also triggers a whole bunch of other transitions: identity transition, relationship transition, status, structure transition, all of those things. So that's why it's so stressful, is because we're dealing with all of these things all at once. And then the other thing that often happens is people will move, they'll downsize, they'll become empty nesters at the same time. And all of that is very stressful. So planning ahead of time, staggering some of these big decisions, don't move and become an empty nester and retire on the same day. Stagger some of these things so that you can mitigate some of that stress and really, like I said, really start to envision, who is my future retired self? How are they spending their time? What brings them meaning and purpose? It's really a process, and it takes time.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, what a great way to end this episode. I think that whether you're an advisor, plan sponsor, plan member, or generally a Canadian out there, this is something that we need to think about, imagine ourselves and reduce that stress and create that clear picture. So I want to thank you very much, Tammy, for coming on
Thank
today
you.
and sharing something that was very unique
Thank you, Tammy.
in this
I learned a
business.
lot.
Thank you both.
This has been the Benefits Alliance Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network and be sure to check out the podcast notes for any additional materials.